Welcome back, Lane. We're going to be continuing with our learning of the iPhone programming. And in our last video, we built an application using quick connections to drag in user interface elements and connect those user interface elements with the code. And we built this very simple app that allows us to input some text here, say a name or a student, and then print out some text to a label, an outlet label. I'll just demonstrate that again. So we can type in Lane and then learn. Lane learns iPhone programming from Greg. Now we could change that to your sister's name, Jelly, and switches to Jelly. So this is a very basic application, and it shows you how to interact with those user interface elements and do some coding, custom coding in the that view controller class to uh, manipulate text, for example, or you could also imagine doing different calculations with the inputted data. So now, when we look at this particular application, we see that we've performed the desired task of inputting the text and then modifying this message we see. And we would expect this keyboard to go away, sort of be dismissed or discarded. And it's not. And there's actually nowhere to get rid of that keyboard. So what we're going to do in this session is allow you to dismiss a keyboard. And we would expect through normal user interface guidelines that once you press learn button, the keyboard would be discarded. And then perhaps also on this this background gray area, it would discard the keyboard. And finally, hitting the return button would discard the keyboard. And we'll get back to the return button in our next session. But for this one, we're going to focus on hitting that button there in this background area. So now, how are we going to do that? Well, we look at our nib file and we see that this learn button has a connection with the learn method. So when this button is pressed, there's a touch-up inside connection with the learn method. Let's take a look at that learn method. So I'm opening back up the file navigation panel, and remember this is the header file .h for our custom class, our view controller. And then this .m file is our implementation. So we can use the jump bar to skip straight to the learn method. Okay, there it is. So let's scroll it down so we can see the whole thing. So it's this, when this method is activated, just after it's performed its text update, we would expect the keyboard to go away or be discarded, dismissed. And the way we can do that is by talking to the text field. So we don't actually talk directly to the keyboard, but instead we talk to the text field. Because when we had tapped that text field became self-important in a way. The text field knew that it was the most important component on the screen at that time. And so it knew to bring up the keyboard. And we call that state the first responder. So the text field said, hey, I'm the most important element, I'm the first responder. And that's when it brought up the keyboard. So what we need to do is actually call a method called resign first responder. So we're telling that text field that it's no longer the most important element on the page. And the way we do that is we look at the what is the name of this text field. So it's called my text field, and we can see that there in the header. And we can also see the connection here again to that text field at this point. And we need to call a method on the text field that's to resign first responder. And we could do that very simply by going into our implementation file in the learn method right after we assign the message to our label. And we can say self.myTextField resign first responder. And that causes the keyboard to be discarded. And I'll show you that right now. So let's run our simulator. And we'll go ahead and put in lane there. Learn. There you go. So it updated our label and it discarded the keyboard. Then when we touch that text field once again, then it knows it's the first responder. And we'll put in your sister Jelly's name. Jelly learns iPhone programming from Greg. There you have it. Now, still we have a problem of if you hit this background area, it's not dismissing the keyboard. So how are we going to fix that? The way we do it is by a little hack where we drag in a button to the screen. And we have that button encompass the entire screen like that. Okay. Now we get rid of this button text, and now it looks like we can't access the other elements that we've already added onto the nib file. And we need to solve that by opening up our objects panel and placing the button in the back like that. So now we'll be able to access the other user interface, and that button will just be in the back. But the button is all white, and we want to still see our gray background. So no changes to the color there on the background. So we can adjust that by selecting the button. Now you might be unsure about having selected it, so you can use a jump bar, for example, to select it. So make sure you got it, or this objects panel. And then once it's selected, then we go to the attributes inspector, and we find the button customization, or the button type, change it to custom. So the button type is now custom, and that causes it to go transparent. It's still there, but we can't see it, and yet we can still cause it to activate methods. And that's what we want to do. We want to associate a method with this button that's in a way invisible. And that method that will be activated when we press the button will dismiss the keyboard also. So let's set that up. I'll go ahead and run it. This is before we've set up the method. So now we're pressing the button and it's not doing what we want. And in fact, we can't even see it. Although that one is. So lane. That one's working just fine. But this it's not responding properly. So we're gonna fix that. And we'll just open up some more space here. Oops. So we'll close down this panel. And now we'll open the assistant editor. And we select the button. So let's just use a jump bar this time. And now hold down that keyboard key. I think it's Control for me. I'm not sure what it's going to be for you because I have a little bit of an odd keyboard. and I'll hold down the control. Oops. Now be careful not to hit that label. We want to be selecting the button. So we select the button, hold down the control, and then this will be a method, an action. And we'll just call this discard keyboard. Touch up inside, scan it to make sure it looks okay, looks fine. And the quick connections, again, gave us an implementation set up already. And we can see it's empty. And what are we going to do? We're going to do exactly what we had done on line 40, which is resign first responder for that text field. Resign first responder. Okay, let's run that. Here we have it, lane. Now let's try to dismiss a keyboard. There, did it. So we can now press the back area, and it dismisses the keyboard, which is nice. And even if we change it there to jelly, we can still dismiss the keyboard like that. But then this learn button is still active, so there. Okay. Now the final area is we want to be able to dismiss the keyboard by pressing the return button, and we'll talk about how to solve that problem in our next video.